You first heard it on a Tuesday. The sound came from a place it could not be. A whisper from the Kepler 186 system, a system whose star had died 1 billion years ago. The silence out there was supposed to be absolute, final. Yet the signal persisted. It was faint, a ghost on the edge of perception. Your screens at the Deep Space Observatory lit up. Alarms you had only ever run in simulations now blared for real. Every instrument you had strained toward that one patch of dead sky. It was impossible. A signal needs a power source. A dead star offers none. The transmission was clean. Too clean. It bypassed the universe's background noise. It was as if it was whispered directly into your ear. Across 500 light-years of nothing. Your colleagues were frantic. They ran diagnostics. They rebooted systems. They searched for any earthly source of interference. There was none. The voice was coming from the void. The data streamed in for 9 straight hours, a tight beam of information from a cold, dark cinder of a sun. It defied physics. It rewrote the rules of star science. And you were the one at the console when it arrived. The one who had to make sense of the ghost. The sound from nowhere was about to change everything. The initial analysis was automated. The computers searched for mathematical patterns. They looked for prime numbers or stellar cartography. They found none of that. Instead, they found something far stranger. Something that made the hair on your arms stand up. They found language. It took another day to isolate the core component, to strip away the carrier wave and listen to the raw signal. The control room fell silent. Every screen showed the same waveform. Every speaker played the same sound. It was not the clicking or chirping of some alien creature. It was a voice, a distinctly human voice. Your blood ran cold? The voice spoke in tongues no one had used for millennia. Ancient Sumerian, Proto-Indo-European, languages that were dust before humanity even dreamed of space. You were a linguist, a specialist in dead languages. This was why they had woken you from cryosleep. This was why you were here. The star was singing in a human voice. You recognized a word, then a phrase, a lament. It was a tapestry of lost dialects, woven together into a single, coherent message. But how? How could ancient languages be broadcast from a dead star? It made no sense. It was a paradox wrapped in an enigma, and it was your job to unravel it. They gave you the command chair. The entire deep space communications array became your instrument. The world's leaders watched your every move. Humanity had waited centuries for a sign of intelligent life. Now it had arrived, and it spoke in the forgotten words of our own ancestors. Your task was crucial. You were the only person alive who could understand this, the only one with the specific, strange knowledge required. Your life's work, once a quiet academic pursuit, was now humanity's single greatest asset. The pressure was immense. The fate of your species rested on your ability to translate a ghost. It was a bit more stressful than defending a doctoral thesis. You lived in the translation matrix for days. Food was brought to you. Sleep came in short, dreamless bursts. The voice was your constant companion. It echoed in the chamber. It filled your waking thoughts. You had to understand. You had to know what it was trying to tell you. You were the key, humanity's only hope. The voice felt personal, like a memory you never had. It felt like home and like a tomb. You pushed past the impossibility of it all. You focused on the words, on the grammar, on the rise and fall of its ancient cadence. You had to deliver an answer, because everyone was waiting. And the signal from the star kept singing its impossible song. As you pieced the words together, a chilling realization dawned. This was not a message of greeting. There was no "Hello, universe" here, no invitation to a grand star-born alliance. The tone was wrong. The emotions embedded in the language were stark, raw, unmistakable. The voice was filled with a terror that transcended time. It was a scream of utter, soul-crushing dread, a plea from a people on the brink of extinction. The phrases you translated spoke of darkness, of a sky growing silent, of great ships that blotted out the stars. This was not first contact. It was a final goodbye. You felt a deep, primal fear, the kind your ancestors felt huddled around a fire, staring out into the oppressive, endless night. The voice spoke of shadows that moved between worlds, of an enemy that did not speak, an enemy that only consumed. You had to warn them. You had to tell command what this really was. Your first report was met with disbelief. The generals and presidents wanted a friend. They wanted a partner in the stars. You gave them a nightmare. You told them the song was not a welcome. It was a warning, a desperate final cry for help from a civilization that had already fallen. You worked faster. The full picture began to emerge. The identity of the speaker became clear. They were not aliens who happened to learn human languages. The truth was far more unsettling. The voice belonged to a precursor race, a people who existed in this galactic arm long before Earth was even born. They called themselves the Chanters. Their civilization was built on sound, on resonance and frequency. They did not build with steel or stone. They built with vibration. Their cities were symphonies. Their technology was music. And their final act was this broadcast, their final, desperate song. They were not human, but their evolution had mirrored our own in a strange way, resulting in similar vocal structures, similar patterns of language. 1 billion years ago, they had faced an enemy that hunted silence, an enemy that hated their song. This message was their final testament, a warning sent across the ages. You realized the horrifying truth. The Chanters were extinct, wiped out by the very foe they described. This signal was their tombstone, a monument of sound traveling the cosmos, waiting for someone to listen, waiting for someone to understand. They were broadcasting their own eulogy, so that another race might avoid their fate. The warning was explicit. It described an empire of silence, a force that moved through the void without light or energy signatures. They were hunters, stalkers of life. They targeted civilizations that reached a certain level of communication. The moment a species sang into the cosmos, they became prey. We had just started singing. The Chanters called them the Void Hunters, a relentless, patient, and ruthless empire. Their ships were described as geometric nightmares, perfect shapes that absorbed all light. They did not communicate. They did not negotiate. They simply arrived. And then there was only silence. Their goal was the eradication of all other sentient life. A quiet galaxy was a controlled galaxy. Just as you finalized the translation, it happened. The sky above Earth changed. High orbit sensors screamed alerts. Objects appeared out of nowhere, not with a flash of light or a roar of engines. They simply resolved into existence. Black shapes against the black of space. Hexagons, octagons, forms of perfect, menacing geometry. Just like the Chanters described, they hung there in the darkness, silent, motionless, a fleet of ancient ships. They had followed the ghost. They had tracked the Chanters' final song across 1 billion years, and it had led them straight to us. The hunters from the void had arrived, and they were looking for the source of the voice. The world held its breath. Panic was a wildfire. The arrival of the silent fleet confirmed your translation. The nightmare was real. World leaders convened in an emergency session. The options were bleak: surrender, beg for mercy, or fight. The chanter's message gave no indication that mercy was an option. Humanity made its choice. We would not be silenced. We would not go quietly into the long night. It was a desperate gamble. Our technology was centuries behind what the chanters described. Our ships were toys compared to the silent monoliths in our orbit. But we had one thing they did not. We had the warning. Our survival now depended entirely on your work, on the ancient message you had pulled from the static. Every detail of the chanter's final testament was now the most valuable information in human history. The generals asked you, "Is there more? Is there anything else in that signal? Anything we can use?" You assured them you would look again. You felt the weight of 7 billion lives on your shoulders. The decision was made. Humanity would fight. We would stand together. We would show the silent hunters that we were not afraid to make a little noise. After all, what's the point of discovering you're not alone if you can't throw a proper welcome party, even if the guests are uninvited? You returned to the signal. You dove back into the stream of sound. The warning was clear. The history was tragic. But your gut told you there was more. The chanters were a race of builders, of creators. They would not leave behind only a tombstone. They would leave behind a sword. You filtered the signal in a new way. You looked for patterns not in the language, but behind it, in the carrier wave itself, in the subtle frequencies that held the voice. And there it was, hidden in plain sight. Not words, not music, but mathematics. Blueprints, a schematic woven into the very fabric of the broadcast. It was a weapon, a sonic resonator, a device designed to turn sound into a focused energy beam. It was the chanter's last great invention, the one they never had time to build, a weapon designed to fight an enemy that hunted sound. The irony was beautiful and deadly. It was a blueprint for a cannon that fired symphonies. You sent the schematics to every lab and factory on the planet. The apathetic dread that had gripped the world was replaced by a furious energy. We had a chance. A ghost from 1 billion years ago had given us a weapon. We had a hidden blueprint, and we were going to use it. The hunters wanted silence. We were about to give them an opera. The planet became a single, unified factory. Old rivalries were forgotten. Borders became meaningless. Every foundry, every fabrication plant, every lab worked around the clock. The task was monumental. We were building a technology we barely understood, based on plans from a long-dead species. Giant resonators were assembled in orbital shipyards, massive tuning forks of exotic alloys. Power conduits were laid to channel the entire energy output of major cities. We were forging a new sword, a weapon of song. We called them the Chanter Cannons, a tribute to the voice that had warned us, a promise that their sacrifice would not be in vain. Meanwhile, the enemy fleet drew closer. Their silent black ships began to move from high orbit, descending toward the planet. They moved with a slow, deliberate patience that was more terrifying than any sudden attack. They were confident, arrogant. They had done this 1,000 times before. They had no idea what was waiting for them. Every hour, the tension grew. The factories worked faster. The engineers pushed the limits of our science. You remained in the command center, guiding the construction, interpreting the finer points of the chanter schematics. The survival of humanity was being forged in fire and steel, and the enemy was at the gate. Then they broke their silence. Not with a voice, but with a simple, brutal message. It appeared on every screen on the planet, a universal text based on mathematics. It was one sentence. Surrender the source of the song. They were hunting the chanter's signal. They believed its source was here, in our system. They demanded we give them the chanters, the very people they had exterminated 1 billion years ago. The irony was staggering. They were chasing a ghost, a phantom echo they could not comprehend, and they were threatening to destroy us for harboring it. We were on the verge of the first hostile contact, based on a cosmic misunderstanding. Our leaders sent back a simple reply, a single image, a map of the dead Kepler 186 system, the home of the voice they sought. It was a gesture of defiance, a way of telling them we knew. We knew who they were, and we knew who they had killed. We were not just some random, emerging species. We were the inheritors of a warning. The enemy did not reply. Their descent continued. They clearly did not believe us, or they did not care. They wanted the voice silenced, and they believed we were hiding it. They had no concept of a message traveling for 1 billion years. Their empire was ancient, but their thinking was rigid, and that was going to be their downfall. The first chanter cannon was ready. The Auditor, mounted on the International Space Station. It was aimed at the lead hunter vessel, a massive obsidian hexagon hanging in the sky. The world watched, waiting. The order was given. Fire. There was no explosion, no flash of light, just a sound. A single, pure, resonant tone that echoed from the station. It grew in intensity, a low hum that became a deafening chord. It was the chorus of destruction. The weapon was live, and it was singing. The sound wave, now a focused beam of kinetic force, struck the hunter ship. For a moment, nothing happened. The black hexagon simply hung there. Then, spiderweb cracks appeared across its surface, not of light or energy, but of pure physical stress. The resonant frequency of the cannon was perfectly tuned to the ship's hull. The hunter ship began to vibrate. Violently, it shook itself apart from the inside out. Panels buckled, sections sheared off. The perfect geometry collapsed into a chaotic wreck. The ship imploded, silently, utterly. It was dismantled by a song. Humanity had struck its first blow. And we did it with music. The effect on the hunter fleet was immediate. Their advance stopped. The silent, confident procession broke. Ships drifted apart. Their perfect formations dissolved into confusion. For the first time in 1 billion years of conquest, their prey had not just fought back. It had fought back with their greatest fear, with sound. You could almost feel their shock across the vacuum of space. An empire stunned. They had come expecting to silence a new voice. Instead, they found a species that had turned an ancient echo into a weapon, a species that had learned to sing the song of their oldest enemy. Our defiance was something they had never encountered. They had hunted the chanters to extinction. They had enforced a reign of silence across countless star systems. They believed themselves to be the ultimate power in the galaxy, the unassailable arbiters of cosmic order. We had just shattered that illusion. We proved that a song could be a sword. On Earth, a wave of defiant joy erupted. We had done it. We had faced the void, and we had made it blink. The chanter cannons were our salvation, a gift from the dead. But the war was not over. The hunter fleet was still there, damaged, confused, but still overwhelmingly powerful. They would adapt. They would counter. We had won a battle. Now we had to win the war. You knew you had to go back to the source, back to the star song. The blueprints for the cannon were hidden there, What else might be concealed within its layers? The chanters were masters of resonance. Their message had to contain more than just a weapon schematic. It had to hold the key to victory. You isolated the original signal again. This time, you ignored the voice. You ignored the blueprints. You searched for the quietest part of the broadcast, the space between the words, the pauses in the lament. And in that silence, you found the last secret. It was not a weapon. It was a frequency, a single complex resonant code, the master frequency of the hunter's own technology, their ships, their communications, their power systems. Everything they built was tuned to this one, silent frequency. It was the key that held their empire together. The chanters had discovered it, and they had hidden it in their final breath. It was the ultimate weapon, not something that destroyed ships one by one, but a code that could disable their entire fleet at once. A sonic key to unlock their own self-destruction. You finally understood the chanters' true genius. They had not just left a warning, they had left an answer, the key to ending the war for good. The plan was audacious. It was borderline insane. We were going to hijack the enemy's own network. But instead of sending data, we were going to send a song. The original chanter lament, broadcast on their master frequency. We were going to make the stars sing war. The chanter cannons were retuned, not to fire destructive blasts, but to act as a global broadcast array. Every cannon on Earth and in orbit was synchronized, pointed at the heart of the hunter fleet. They would all broadcast the same signal, at the same time, turning the entire solar system into a resonant chamber. The hunters were regrouping, forming new attack patterns. They were recovering from their initial shock. Their arrogance was returning. They still saw us as primitives who had gotten lucky. They did not know that we now held the key to their kingdom. They were about to hear the voice they had tried so hard to silence. You stood at the command console, the weight of all history on your shoulders. The voice of a dead race, the technology of a silent empire, the hope of a young species, all converging in this single moment. You gave the command, broadcast the song. The star began to sing, not from a single point, but from everywhere at once. The ancient lament of the chanters echoed across the solar system, carried on the hunter's own secret frequency. It was not a weaponized blast this time. It was a whisper, a ghost in their machine. The effect on the hunter fleet was instantaneous and catastrophic. Their ships, tuned to that master frequency, resonated with the chanter song. It was not a violent shaking. It was a deep, systemic failure. Their power conduits overloaded. Their navigation systems failed. Their silent black holes began to glow from within, not with light, but with corrupted energy. The song tore them apart from the inside. The master frequency that held their empire together became its undoing. Ships began to drift aimlessly. Some simply powered down, becoming dead husks in the void. Others erupted in silent, cold explosions. The ancient voice of the chanters, their sorrow and their warning, was the last thing the Hunter Empire ever heard. The sky cleared. The menacing shapes were gone, replaced by a graveyard of silent, broken ships. There was no counterattack, no final, desperate assault, just a complete and total system failure. The war was over, won not by bombs or lasers, but by a billion-year-old song. The star had sung war, and the war was done. Humanity was safe. The silence that followed was not the silence of the hunters. It was the silence of peace, of awe, of a new beginning. We were no longer just a curious species looking to the stars. We were something more. We were the inheritors of the song. The chanters' final testament was now our sacred text. Their warning was our guiding principle. We had faced the darkness and survived. We had proven that life and sound were stronger than silence and death. Our journey in the cosmos had just begun. But now we walked a different path. We became the guardians of the star that sang. We studied its secrets. We honored its memory. We prepared for a future among the stars, not as conquerors, but as custodians. We carried the song of the chanters with us, a reminder of the price of survival, and a promise that no voice would ever be silenced again. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders, and now it was full of our song.